but all of America is having a discussion. There's an editorial in the New York Times around this time, December 1862. What is to be done with them? That's the way in which the question was phrased. No one knew. 4 million slaves, an abstraction, remote. What is to be done with them? Frederick Douglass, who's one of the heroes of the story, of course, and who needs to be part of the tale, this drives him crazy. Frederick Douglass writes an editorial in which he says, what is to be done with them? Leave them alone. It's your doing with them that got them into this problem in the first place. Douglass is making the argument, others are making the argument that, you know what, there can be a new set of relations between white and black once freedom is achieved, but first, freedom must be achieved. That long buildup, overcoming those anxieties, constitutional scruples, the border states, diplomacy, will the soldiers continue to fight? What is going to be with white-black relations? It took time. By July 22nd of 1862, at that time Lincoln was traveling back and forth to this very place, he announces to his cabinet his decision to issue an Emancipation Proclamation. A discussion ensues, and the decision is made to hold it off to tie it to a military victory. They didn't want it to appear as if issuing this Emancipation Proclamation was a last shriek on the retreat, as Seward put it. And that victory comes on September 17th at Antietam. On September 22nd, Lincoln issues the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, thus inaugurating this period of the 100 days. It's an amazing thing to think about, right? Because here's what he does. He says, in 100 days, I'm going to take action against the slaves. And why does he do that? He's a smart man. He understands that he wants the society to have a debate. He wants there to be a robust discussion. He wants, in effect, those 3 months to be something of a referendum on what is going to take place on January 1st. And the bulk, of course, of my story is really the first time looking really closely at that period, because we tend to forget that the document itself evolved. And it evolved in dramatic and important ways. What are some of the reactions? Well, here's one of the reactions. A guy in Maryland draws a picture of Lincoln looking like he's demoniacal. He's crazed. He's clearly being informed by nothing less than the devil. His foot is on the Constitution of the United States. There are portraits of John Brown as his sainted hero in one corner. On the other side is a portrait of a slave insurrection, Saint-Domingue, which is to suggest that if you free the slaves, they will rise up and cut the throats of every white in this country. So here's one of the reactions. Hysteria, anxiety, concern. This comes from England, Punch magazine. Again, Lincoln playing the card. And it's interesting, by the way, how often he used the metaphor of games and playing cards. He even said to one correspondent that emancipation was his last card to be played. And this was picked up in this cartoon. So here he is again looking crazed, playing the trump card, if you will, of emancipation, but doing so over a keg of gunpowder. Another notion that this is only going to destroy America as we know it. Or this from the Southern Illustrated News. We would imagine that the Confederates would not take well to the idea that Lincoln is going to act against slavery. Notice he's called King Abraham. And that's important. That he has become a dictator, that he has become a tyrant. The argument that he has abused the powers of his office. And one thing that isn't often mentioned, 2 days after the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, on September 24th, 1862, he suspends habeas corpus. So this is a guy who's, in effect, helping to define the notion of executive power and executive authority. And lots of people, North as well as South, are opposed to that, resist that. He's taking away the mask of Lincoln to reveal his true identity of being the devil. And in the background, what do we have? We have the half-built Washington Monument, which construction of which was stopped during the Civil War, not resumed again until later, and on top of it, the gallows. In the foreground, the proclamation itself. This is the picture, though, that I've always loved. Because the tendency to think about Lincoln as the great emancipator is to airbrush out of the portrait all of the agony, all of the strain, all of the confusion. And this is a print from David Gilmore Blythe that shows Lincoln in the struggle, in the process of writing the Emancipation Proclamation. And it's a lot of fun to look at because you just keep kind of looking for clues of different things that he's resorting to. He has the Bible and the Constitution on his lap. He's writing the proclamation. I love that he's in his nightshirt, in his slipper, perhaps in this very building, working on this document. Buchanan is hanging in the background. Andrew Jackson is on the mantle on the left-hand side. He's a heroic figure, of course, because in the nullification crisis, Jackson said, yeah, try it and see what I'm going to do. I'm going to come down there and hang all of you. So he becomes a figure, the Democrat Jackson, for preserving the Union. Lots of petitions from various groups imploring the president to act against slavery. His mall, his rail splitters mall on top of a map of the Confederacy. In the upper right, a map of the world with a sword in it with Washington's name on the sword. A reminder of Washington's, beware of entangling alliances. And this little detail, of course, of his trunk thrown open, A. Lincoln, Springfield, his coat thrown over. This really does capture the struggle. The struggle that Lincoln went through, the struggle that the nation went through, to come to some terms about this action of emancipation. Of course, as I said, airbrushing out all of the faults. There you go. This is the heroic Lincoln. He never looked so good in his life. And look at his hair. His hair is... But it's an idealized vision after the fact of what Lincoln did and what he achieved. This testing ground of the 100 days is absolutely critical. Jurists debate, is the decree constitutional? Soldiers talk about it on and off. There are diplomatic consequences. By the way, the elections of 1862 are held that fall, right in the midst of all of this. And everyone says at the time, oh, that'll solve it. The elections of 1862 will be a referendum on emancipation. People are going to go vote. And if they are in favor of the Emancipation Proclamation, then they will re-elect Republicans. So what happens? What happens is what often happens in off-year elections. The party in power gets crushed. And they lose 28 seats in Congress. Lincoln's home district in Illinois is lost to Republicans. They lose the governorships of New York and New Jersey. New Jersey, not that big a deal, but New York is pretty... and Lincoln's mailbox fills with letters. Well, good try, Abe. It's worth a shot. Clearly, you're now going to have to back down. Clearly, the people have spoken, and there's no way you can issue an Emancipation Proclamation. And he goes through this long correspondence, this testy correspondence, and what does he do? He says, I choose not to interpret these results as a referendum on emancipation. If they're a referendum on anything, they're a referendum on the fact that the war is not going well. And we need to do a better effort. We need to be more aggressive. People are tired. People are saddened. People are exhausted. We have to figure out a way to make progress on the battlefield. And so, not only does he refuse to revoke the Emancipation Proclamation, in many ways he does what might seem almost unthinkable. He makes it stronger. He makes it more radical. He changes it from the preliminary proclamation. By the way, remember those Kentuckians he was so worried about? Well, a group of Kentucky Unionists come to see him, and they say, listen, there's a lot of pressure here for you to revoke the Emancipation Proclamation. And here's what he says to them, and I quote exactly. He says, I would rather die than take back a word of the Proclamation of Freedom. He says that in late November of 1862. he continues to change his mind in a number of different ways as the society. And this is a famous print from the painting of Francis Carpenter. We have it in many places, including the museum here, showing Lincoln in that first discussion of July 22nd over the Emancipation Proclamation. It's an interesting story. One could give an entire lecture just on the story of this painting, because Carpenter was an amazingly ambitious young painter, and he gets permission to live in the White House and to paint. Can you imagine that today? It's astonishing. And so he's constantly borrowing books from Lincoln's office because he wants to paint them from real life. And Lincoln is wandering around looking for them, and so there's a key to this. So the bottom right is William Whiting's War Powers of the President. And there's the scene where Lincoln in 1864 is looking for the book. He can't find it. It's over there in the studio. So this is going back and forth. It's a huge canvas. This is the canvas that he worked on. And sadly, it's a failure. At the unveiling, Lincoln says something diplomatic, such as, "It cannot be improved upon," which is an interesting way to compliment someone. And Carpenter sort of knows that it's a failure, and he takes it on tour, and nobody wants to buy it. The Library of Congress doesn't want to buy it. Eventually, it's purchased and donated, where it hangs listlessly on the west staircase of the Senate. But here's the great part of the story that gives us all hope, is Carpenter decides to write a book about his experiences in the White House, and it's called 6 Months in the White House. It becomes an international bestseller. So it's a great story. The guy who couldn't make it as a painter becomes a renowned author. And I would encourage you, the book has been reprinted many, many times, and it's a wonderful source for secondhand but pretty reliable stories about what's going on in the Lincoln White House. The anticipation continues to build. Just imagine it. Imagine it. Imagine if you have fought your life to abolish slavery, and now the time is coming near where this is going to take place. Imagine if you're enslaved. And the word has spread. Everyone knows that. You know, the slave telegraph line has passed the word. January 1st, emancipation. People began running away long before January 1st. We have lots and lots of evidence of this. There are watch night parties on December 31st in churches, in assembly halls, in contraband camps, and in plantations, in slave quarters in the area. In Washington, D.C., at a contraband camp, one man on December 31st starts weeping. And he's asked, "Why are you weeping?" And he says, "Because tomorrow my child is to be sold nevermore." It's just an amazing moment. This is a painting that was commissioned and sent to President Lincoln by William Lloyd Garrison. There too is a story. William Lloyd Garrison, the fiery abolitionist, who in 1831 demanded immediate abolition, who early in the war said of Lincoln, and I quote, "If he is 6 feet 4 tall in height, he's a dwarf in mind," because he was so frustrated with the tempo of progress. By 1864, he has this painting commissioned. It's sent to the White House, and it hangs still today in the White House. So that moment of anticipation, that moment of anxiety. Here, a print of a soldier coming to read the Emancipation Proclamation to the slaves. And a guy named John Murray Forbes had printed 1 million miniature Emancipation Proclamations. And it's a crazy thing to think that any of these could have survived, but some have. And there was one exhibition, so these little miniature Emancipation Proclamations, and soldiers would sprinkle them like seeds of freedom wherever they went. And this would also continue to help spread the word. I said to you that the final proclamation is a more radical document. And here's 3 things that changes from the preliminary to the final.